It's Thursday, it's the 26th of June. You're watching ARIRANG Korea's only global network. Live from Seoul, I'm Moon Gun-young. After seeing her last two prime minister nominees bow out before getting anywhere near a confirmation hearing, President Park Geun-hye has decided against naming a third and will instead retain current Prime Minister Chung Hong-won. Our correspondent Jisun has the details.
In a surprise announcement on Thursday, the presidential office said President Park had rejected Prime Minister Chung Hong-won's previous offer to resign and asked him to continue working for the nation with a sense of duty. Prime Minister Chung had expressed a wish to step down in the wake of the Seoul ferry accident 2 months ago. It is the first time in Korea's constitutional history that a prime minister will be staying on after rendering a resignation. The presidential press secretary said President Park, who has promised a massive restructuring of the government and a bolstering of the national safety system following April's ferry tragedy, went through great pains before making the latest decision.
The administrative vacuum and division of public opinion intensified due to the previous nominations. The president has decided the situation can no longer be left alone.
In regards to the presidential office's personnel verification system, which has been heavily criticized after the recent back-to-back nominee withdrawals, a new senior secretary will be put in charge of finding people to fill positions and verifying their credentials. Upon Thursday's announcement, the prime minister vowed to pour all his energy into correcting irregularities in Korean society and making the country a safer place to live. He also said when necessary, he would not hesitate to offer his views to the president on state matters. The ruling party said the president's decision was understandable and that she had put a priority on minimizing the administrative vacuum and moving forward with the running of state affairs. The main opposition, on the other hand, criticized the administration for failing to meet the people's expectations to reform Korean society in the aftermath of the ferry disaster. Jisun, ARIRANG News.
Now, inter-Korean talks on ways to improve the Kaesong Industrial Complex are currently underway in the North Korean border city of Kaesong. The meeting is the first in 6 months, and some are taking it as a sign of thawing inter-Korean relations. Our Unification Ministry correspondent Hwang Sung-hee reports.
For the first time in 6 months, officials from the two Koreas met for talks to discuss matters related to their jointly run Kaesong Industrial Complex. The quarterly meeting of the Joint Committee of the Business Park has been at a standstill since December last year, when inter-Korean relations soured following military drills between Seoul and Washington. Departing for Kaesong on Thursday morning, the South Korean delegation said the meeting was an opportunity to review how far they've come with the normalization of the business park.
As the meeting comes after a long time, it will serve as an opportunity to inspect the tasks of developing and normalizing the complex.
Key issues up for discussion include the installment of internet connection and the implementation of an electronic entry system to facilitate South Korean workers' commute in and out of the complex. The Kaesong complex, which opened in the early 2000s, is one of the last remaining symbols of inter-Korean cooperation. With some 50,000 North Koreans working for more than 120 South Korean factories, operations at the complex are greatly influenced by the state of inter-Korean ties. Last year, the factory zone sat idle for 5 months after North Korea unilaterally closed it down amid escalating tensions on the Korean peninsula. Some say Thursday's talks could be seen as a sign of Pyongyang's willingness to try and thaw the current icy relations between the two Koreas. Hwang Sung-hee, ARIRANG News.
Korea's Ministry of National Defense submitted a 2015 defense budget proposal to the Finance Ministry on Thursday. Now, the request comes to a little over 38 trillion won. That's roughly $37.3 billion, which is up 7.5% from this year's budget. The military plans to use about $25.5 billion of the total to maintain and enhance military fighting capabilities, while some $11.5 billion would go towards defense development, including missile systems. The military also aims to enhance life in the barracks for conscript soldiers by increasing their salaries by up to 15%. The world's largest international maritime exercise, dubbed RIMPAC, begins on this Thursday off the coast of Hawaii. Now, in this year, it has an added edge. China, for the first time, will be joining the U.S.-led naval drills. Experts are saying this shows that neither Washington nor Beijing want their military-to-military relations to deteriorate. Our Shin Se-min has more.
For the first time ever, Chinese naval ships will be firing gunshots off the coast of Hawaii inside U.S. maritime territory as part of multi-nation naval drills. The biannual naval exercise, dubbed RIMPAC, begins Thursday with a total of 23 countries taking part. 4 Chinese ships, including a missile destroyer and more than 1,000 Chinese military personnel, are already in Hawaii. The exercises come amid tensions as Beijing continues to assert itself in its maritime disputes in the East and South China Seas, while Washington seeks to reinforce its influence in the Asia-Pacific region. U.S.-China relations have also been strained by U.S. claims of cyber espionage by Beijing. China rejects Washington's accusations. The U.S. government says it invited China as a means to ease tensions and boost naval cooperation between the two countries. In a recent report to Congress, the Pentagon said it would continue to monitor China's evolving military strategy, doctrine, and force development while building the foundations of a stronger military-to-military relationship with Beijing. China's attitude towards the U.S. has softened with the invite. In the run-up to the drills, China's deputy naval commander stressed the importance of the world's 2 superpowers establishing stronger military ties. Shin Se-min, ARIRANG NEWS.
Now, a U.S. lawmaker has denounced Japan for denying its historical wrongdoings. Chairman of the U.S. House Foreign Affairs Committee, Ed Royce, made the comments before meeting with visiting Korean Vice Foreign Minister Cho Tae-yong on Wednesday. Now, Royce said it was important that Japan and others learn from history so as not to repeat the mistakes of the past. He said one of the most important lessons was to admit, referencing Tokyo's recent review of the Kono statement, which acknowledged the Japanese military had forced women into sexual servitude during World War II. Although the Japanese government upheld the statement, it claimed there was no evidence to support the claims of the former sex slaves. Cho said he appreciated Royce's support and that it sent a strong signal to those who are trying to rewrite history. Well, not a day goes by without some good or bad football action from Brazil, and day 14 of the games was no exception. Our sports correspondent Jisun is again standing by to ensure that we don't miss out on anything. Now, Jisun, we are already halfway through the 2014 World Cup, and we'll be seeing more teams packing their bags from this point on, right?
2 weeks have already passed since the 2014 World Cup kicked off in Brazil, and only half the teams can remain to play on at this point. We often see football superstars struggle at the World Cup, either because their national team don't have the skills to back them up, or they just get stage fright. This year, though, we're seeing one footballer cement himself as a legend of the game. Now, who else could we be talking about but Lionel Messi? The pin-side striker scored a great goal after just 3 minutes against Nigeria to give Argentina an early 1-0 lead. But Nigeria's Ahmed Musa equalized just a minute after, cutting the Argentinian fan celebration short. Both strikers added another, but Argentina takes this one as Rojo sealed 3-2 victory with a goal in the second half. Scoring in all 3 group matches, Messi now shares the top scorer spot with Brazil's Neymar with 4 goals from 3 matches. Despite the loss, Nigeria advances to the next round as Iran lost 3-1 to Bosnia-Herzegovina. France drew 0-0 against Ecuador, quitting the next round with their European neighbor, Switzerland. Now only 4 spots remain in the last 16. These spots will be filled by the end of this evening in Brazil, kicking off with Group G at 1 p.m. local time. With Germany and the U.S. leading the group with 4 points each, they can both move on to the next round by just drawing the match. But Portugal will be hoping that they don't, so they can sneak to the next knockout stage with a strong win against Ghana. Korean football fans will once again gather on the streets to cheer on the squad for Korea's last group match at 5 a.m. on a Friday morning, Seoul time. With Belgium already in the final 16, the window is open for 3 countries in Group H. So what do Korea need to do? They need a comprehensive victory against Belgium and for Russia to beat or draw against Algeria, so it's going to be very, very tough. But head coach Hong Myung-bo is unlikely to make many changes to the team that lost to Algeria earlier. He told reporters that he will most likely select under-fire striker Park Ju-young, who has been struggling in Brazil in the first 11. The phrase he repeated over and over was that his players would do their best. But on the other hand, the Belgium coach is resting his star men since they're already through. Let's hear what the players have to say.
We have one last group match. That's all we are thinking about. We are trying our best to give it all that we can, without too much pressure.
We're winning our matches, but we aren't yet at 100%. That will come with time. We'll play better, gain confidence, and win matches in style.
Well, we'll see which of these players stepped off the pitch at Arena Corinthians in Sao Paulo in the early hours of Friday morning Korea time with a big smile on their faces. Let's hope it's Korea. And that was your look at today's World Cup actions, and I'll see you back here with more from Brazil 2014.
Well, revitalizing the economy tops President Park's to-do list, and it's what she wants from her finance minister-designate Choi Kyung-hwan. Che has suggested a policy of boosting domestic demand by making it easier for households to borrow money. But economists warn that this nation's household debt is already dangerously high. Our Connie Kim with the details.
Korea's household debt has grown so much that it's threatening to hurt the future growth of the economy. And that's the warning by a major government think tank. Korea's household debt topped $1 trillion last year, which is 85.6% of the country's GDP. Now that's beyond the 85% threshold where the think tank says consumers start cutting back on spending, which could spell problems for the incoming economic policy chief. Finance Minister-designate Choi Kyung-hwan wants to encourage households to borrow more to buy homes and other real estate as a means of spurring economic activity.
If regulators lower bars for lending, it will revitalize the housing and construction sector in the short term. However, in the long term, the overall economy is expected to become vulnerable. In that sense, second thoughts must be given before they start easing limits for housing loans for the sake of short-term benefits.
Credit rating agency Fitch has also echoed the warning, saying easing regulations on home purchases could aggravate the already serious household debt problem. The agency underscored household debt as a risk factor that could threaten the country's sovereign position. Korea's household debt to disposable income reached its highest level ever at 163% last year, higher than other advanced economies such as the United Kingdom at 152% and the United States at 111%. With household debt reaching dangerously high levels in Korea, the incoming finance minister has a tough job on his hands. He'll be tasked with bringing mounting debt levels under control while also boosting domestic consumption. Connie Kim, ARIRANG News.
Now, it's not only ballooning household debt that's adding to the burden of mid-income families here in Korea. Wages grew at the slowest pace in more than 2 years in the first quarter of this year. Data from the Bank of Korea shows that real wages came to an average of around $2,900 per person in the first 3 months. Now, although that's up 1.8% from the same period last year, it's the smallest jump since the fourth quarter of 2011. This means it could take time for domestic demand to fully recover. The real wage growth represents the income growth of an employee working in a firm with 5 or more workers after taking into account the effects of inflation. Meanwhile, Korea's corporate profitability improved in the first quarter of this year on the back of the nation's moderate economic recovery. But the outlook for the second quarter remains bleak. Our Hwang Ji-hye explains why.
In the first 3 months of this year, Korean companies seem to be weathering economic uncertainties at home and abroad rather well, reflecting the nation's moderate recovery track during the period. Korea's central bank says that corporate profitability improved in the first quarter of this year from a year earlier, with profit margins reaching 5.2% in the January to March period, up from 4.8%. That means companies are now getting 52 cents in profit out of every $100 in sales, whereas they earned 48 cents in the previous year. Profit margin improved across all industries, save for the shipbuilding sector, with the electronics and automobile sectors leading the gain. The central bank says, however, that the upbeat trend might not continue on through the second quarter. That is because of the ferry disaster in April that resulted in the further denting of already sluggish private spending. For a glimpse at the pace of recovery in the second quarter of this year, pundits are waiting for May figures, which will give a better indication of whether the impact of the disaster is temporary or more long-term. Hwang Sung-hee, ARIRANG News.
Well, which country does the most good for the planet? Well, it's not South Korea, at least not according to a new survey. The Good Country Index created by independent policy advisor Simon Anholt measured 125 countries based on their contributions to humanity, using data from the UN, the World Bank, and other global institutions. South Korea came in at number 47 on the list, boosted by its contributions to science, technology, and culture, but pulled down by poor marks in international peace and security. Ireland ranked number 1 on the index, followed by Finland and Switzerland, while Libya, Vietnam, and Iraq brought up the rear. North Korea was not included on that list.
When the latest news meets the latest business stories, we give you a bigger and better picture of the world. Business Today with Moon Gon-young. Every weekday, only on ARIRANG.
For some time now, the Korean government has focused on the housing rental market out of concern for those without home ownership. But those who own a house but still live in a rental house elsewhere are saying they feel left out. Let's take a closer look. We are joined live in the studio by Dr. Kim Byung-ju. Dr. Kim, first of all, how big is this group that we're talking about?
I think in terms of my calculation, we are talking about these people who actually, as you mentioned, have households that have house ownership but living elsewhere other than the houses that they own. I think they account for about 1 out of every 10 household that are renting these houses. Let's bring up the numbers here on the screen and take a look at the overall distribution here. We are talking about that green side of the segment here. And as I mentioned, that probably means all those households that are renting their houses, 1 out of 10, we are talking about that. And the old goal for the government and the nation was to increase the red zone, the household that own houses, and decrease the blue and green zone, I suppose. But now that goal has been kind of like set aside, and now for the past several years, the goal has been reducing the cost for those people in the green and blue zones here, and which is not actually being materialized. The goal remains very tough. The cost for rental is continuously increasing, while the value of the assets for those people in the red zone is continuously decreasing. So they're saying basically what's happening is, a lot of efforts has been made to help those people in the blue zone, but these green zone people, they have been kind of like left out suffering, and that is an interesting point of debate and discussion these days.
You know, it used to be common sense, at least to my knowledge, that people who want to seek rental housing in popular education districts, of course, for their children, and Korea being very, very feverish on education. Does education for children still top the reasons why these homeowners are living outside of the houses that they own?
That is a very much reasonable guess, and it makes perfect sense considering our experience for the past several decades. It's particularly here in Seoul, you know, several educational districts hugely popular, and we've seen their rental costs rising continuously. But however, in terms of overall statistics, which we will show on the screen right now, the answer seems to be quite different here. Basically, what it says is as you can see, education accounts for only about 15% of, slightly over 15% of those people for the reasons for living in houses other than the houses that they own, those people who are renting their houses. Only slightly over 15%. Education is the reason. And what's surprising here is that you can see the distance to work. That's about 33% over that. And then transportation overall. And the living environment, they don't like the living environment for the houses that they own, so they choose to live somewhere else where things are more convenient. So funny and interesting thing here is that if you add up the numbers for those people who chose distance to work as the reason, and then this transportation overall, and then living environment altogether, we're talking about like over 50%, close to 56 to 57% of people actually having chosen to buy houses at areas that they don't like, actually. So this is a very interesting and Korean-style phenomena. I mean, if you know, the natural guess would be people will choose to buy their houses in the areas that they like, but this is not the case here in Korea. Over half of them actually have chosen to purchase their houses in areas that they ended up not liking. Of course, we are talking about people, as you briefly mentioned, you know, whose job locations may move around. They may be working in large companies, and these companies could actually send these people around to different areas. But I think that just accounts for a relatively small number of people, and this just shows very interesting case that I think is relatively unique here in Korea.
Would you say this is the result of the housing market speculation that we used to have?
I think, yeah, I think that would be the reasonable guess here because, you know, during the period of 2000 until up to 2009, a lot of people are very much pressed to buy their houses because until up to that moment, 2009 or so, general expectation was that real estate market will continue to rise as it has been for the past several decades. So a lot of us were very pressed. In a way, facing stress and pressure to buy these houses. And a lot of people may have actually secured their loans from the banks and so on and purchased these houses. And because they were in a hurry, they ended up buying houses in areas where they didn't exactly like to live. And so, as you mentioned, the overall real estate market speculation for almost sure is the reason why they ended up, you know, having these kind of houses where they later on choose not to live.
Well, so we can see that these people, so renting houses away from the homes that they own, they are more or less caught in the middle, especially in time of a sluggish housing market.
Right, exactly. As one of our reports have mentioned, the household debt problem here in Korea, it's a huge problem. And I think these people that we are talking about here in this segment today has a lot to do with it because they purchased these houses under stress with the old belief that the real estate market will continue to rise. Now, overall, what we are seeing is the real estate market kind of losing its values continuously, gradually over time. Now, in the worst case, some of these people have their purchased houses underwater, you know, below the original cost, but they still have to continue to pay back their debt payment. And at the same time, they have to deal with this rental cost for the houses where they actually live continuously rising. So they're like totally crunched and caught in the middle. And a lot of people are actually now raising their voice. And that is the reason why we are talking about it here today. Korean media reports are covering these people who are raising their voice saying, look, government has been only taking care of those people who do not own houses. But look at us, those of us who actually own houses but choose not to live there and then choose to live elsewhere in this rental housing, we are very much being squeezed here and we need help. And that's their voice being heard these days here in Korea. So a very interesting phenomenon.
So not making much money from the home that they own.
Right.
And actually
not only making money, but actually the value is decreasing. Yeah,
right.
Losing money, right.
And then having to pay more to the rentals.
Right.
All right. Well, definitely something that we might see get addressed sometime in the future.
I think so.
All right. Dr. Kim Byung-ju, thank you so much for today.
Thank you.
That's your business today on this Thursday. Thank you for watching. Do join us again at 6 p.m. Korea time on Early Edition at 6.